Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Inkwell Gamers podcast. We are now on episode 45, which is a pretty monumental number I feel like we should acknowledge.
Yeah, it's... I'm surprised we made it this far.
Yeah, well, I'm sure people are surprised that we're back too, considering we went MIA for a little while there. They probably thought that we weren't going to make it to episode 45, but here we are.
Yeah, we are not dead, unlike Bucky's soon to be.
Yeah, Bucky he gonna be dead here soon, and we will talk about that first. But yeah, thank you guys for being patient with us. We've had a crazy few weeks, and I don't think we anticipated our summer being as busy as it has been. So we had started our podcast in the fall, right after Gen Con, and obviously fall into winter, it's pretty easy to do this because we don't have anything else going on. But summer has been pretty crazy for us. We just got back from a nice family vacation that was good to get away for. And we are back in action. And hopefully not going to skip any more weeks. But yeah, thanks for hanging with us. It's been crazy, but we're back.
Yeah, and we're really excited to be back and give our thoughts on some of the hot topics.
Hot topics like you had mentioned before. R.I.P. to the little squeakity squeaker.
Yeah, the squirrel, as effective next month, is gone, and I cannot be much happier about it.
Sure you are.
Oh, I'm definitely happy about it. It'd be hard to be happier about it. Dana, I want to hear your thoughts on it first.
Yeah, look, I mean, as someone who has been using Bucky for the past few sets, it's what I took to Chicago even, and still might use in set champs, TBD. We're going to talk about that at the very end, what we're going to be bringing this weekend, but I loved him, obviously, because I played him. However, I think I was aware enough to know of the impact that he was having on the game and that he was just super oppressive. I mean, we kind of had argued about this at the beginning of conversations regarding Bucky getting banned, like before they even made the changes. And you were saying how it was oppressive, and I definitely kicked back a little bit at first because I didn't want to believe it. But now I feel like I've matured a little bit more, and I do recognize that it was pretty hindering because you could pretty much start doing something on turn 2, making them discard, honestly, if you had Diablo that you shifted after you played Bucky. But that's pretty brutal to do to someone already on turn. Like, it's just too quick. It's too quick. So
yeah, it just snowballs very fast because they are going to keep printing more and more Floodborns. Mm-hmm. And the more Floodborns you print, the better Bucky gets. So, I mean, they printed a Shift Floodborn and Diablo that you could play the same turn, and then they followed it up with the Aladdin that you can just play for 3 ink on turn 3, and then it just goes all the way up the curve. Bucky was never really great before because there wasn't like a critical mass of Floodborns, but now there is, and it was just a card that was just going to get way better over time, and it did. Yeah, it's just not a very fun play experience for the person playing against it. And I know what a lot of people are going to say. Yeah, Madame Medusa, be prepared.
I hate Medusa.
Those cards aren't fun either.
Be prepared isn't as bad as they used to be, honestly. My opinion of it has shifted. I still hate Medusa, but go ahead.
I mean, the difference in those is that, one, Bucky is inkable and it only costs 2. Whereas Medusa is like a 6-cost character that is uninkable. And one allows you to play the game, whereas Bucky does not allow your opponent to play the game very often. And the worst thing about Bucky is that it's just so limiting on your resources that all it takes is one Diablo to go unanswered for like 2 turns, or a beast to go unanswered, and because you had to discard all your resources, you can never banish those card advantage characters, and then the game just gets the game just runs away from you.
Yeah.
I know a lot of Ruby Amethyst players, like the play pattern that they had to kind of enable was just not to really play anything unless it was a Maleficent or a Merlin Rabbit, cards that draw you cards.
Yeah.
Until you hit 7 ink to play Be Prepared. And just passing like 5 turns in a row because you can't play anything because you can't afford to discard all your cards in order to just win that matchup. I just don't think that's a really great play experience.
Yeah, I get it. Do you, I mean, obviously I know how you feel about this, but let's talk about it on here. How they addressed Bucky, we both feel is not ideal.
No.
What are your thoughts on that?
I appreciate that they don't want to ban a card this early. As far as competitive play is concerned, they effectively did because they just turned way too many knobs on it. Mm-hmm. They took away the ward, they changed its ability so the characters had to shift, and they made it cost more. I think you could have basically made any of those changes in Bucky would have been very manageable.
Yeah.
They just did all 3, so now it's just not even a playable card. It's really awkward that they did that, though, because it's just such a totally different card that people who aren't necessarily in the know, they're going to go to their LGS with these old copies of Bucky's, and they're going to play them, and their opponent's going to be like, that's not what that card does.
Yeah.
And that creates a lot of feel-bad moments. Mm-hmm. So I hope they have a plan of getting the new copies of Bucky's into everyone's hand. Just giving, I don't know, hundreds to every local game store that they can so they can just pass them out free.
Yeah, I think that was my initial thought when I first saw that they were doing this the way that they were, is unlike having a ban where, you know, if someone's trying to play the card and you're like, oh, like that card just can't be played anymore. It's hard to explain to someone, yeah, Bucky Squeak Tutor is a card that can get played, but the card that you have is not the right version of that card. And unless they make some sort of distinguishable, like obviously there is a distinguishable difference in the actual cards itself, but I almost wonder, since they said it is going to be starting with Shimmering Skies, I almost wonder if the reprint, you know how they put the set numbers on the bottom? I almost wonder if they're going to put a 5 on that one to insinuate that set 5 is when the new version come out. Like, there has to be something to help people, but that was my initial thought, that it's going to be really hard to explain to someone that that card is still legal, but the version they have
just
is not.
Just not that one.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't mind that they didn't ban it because there are definitely people not in a competitive crowd that probably really love Bucky as a card, and they'll probably want to just play with whatever version they have. So even if it's the banned version, they might still want to play with it and build a deck around it, and I can appreciate that. I could definitely see someone showing up to like a local game store with like 4 of the original and then 4 of the of the new versions as well, just not knowing and trying to play 8 though. That would be funny.
That would be funny. Now, I think another question that I had is, even though the old version cannot be played anymore, do you think we're going to see a price increase of it because it's now going to be special, can't be played type of thing? Like maybe in Magic, if there are banned cards that people still like to collect because they're banned, is that a thing in Magic?
I mean, a lot of the cards that are older that are banned or restricted. Restricted usually means you can just play one of those in your deck, but that's only relevant in one format. Besides Commander.
I almost wonder if, now that, sorry, not to cut you off, but I wonder, wouldn't that have been interesting if they did that?
I think that just is more confusing. The format in Magic is called Vintage, and it's a format that really, like, not a lot of people play. Like, you have to kind of have been around a long time to play that format and kind of be in the know in that format.
Yeah.
I think so.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, like, if you think it's hard to follow, I mean, theoretically, everybody knows the general rule, you can only play 4 copies of one kind of card with that specific name. But they kind of did the opposite of that with the Dalmatians. You can play as many Dalmatians with that same name as you want. And that's, I mean, obviously those don't get played in tournament, but like people had followed along with that rule. Like they understood, okay, that one card I know I can play a lot of. Obviously it's very thematic.
Well, it's printed on the card too. So that makes it easier.
Well, they could have reprinted and just said, I don't know. They could have done anything,
yeah,
but
I think I don't mind the cards that are like, because Magic has some of these too, where it's like you can play any number of these in your deck, and those cards usually aren't good, but they're kind of fun to play with for different reasons. Mm-hmm. But if you limit it to just one Bucky in your deck, the games where your opponent draws that one Bucky and he does his Bucky thing just feel infinitely worse because your opponent has one in their deck. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of glad they didn't go that direction. Just change it, nerf it. It's fine.
All right.
Get rid of it.
Any other thoughts on Bucky?
Good riddance.
Okay. We need to have a little moment of silence, okay?
All right, moment's gone.
Okay. Moving on. We have set champs that are going on right now. We unfortunately did not get to play in any so far. Unlucky. The first weekend, I think, we were still on vacation. And then last weekend, we had some family stuff going on. So we're squeezing as much as we can into the next 2 weeks. We have 2 this weekend, and we signed up for 2 next weekend, too. So we're going to have 4 total that we're going to go off of. But as far as prepping for it goes, this is our first competitive scene that we're getting back into since Pixelborn has been gone. And we wanted to briefly talk about basically how we've at least been trying to prep for set champs. And this can apply, obviously we know set champs have already been happening the past 2 weeks, but obviously this is applicable to stores that might do win-a-box tournaments or whatever. Like this is just in general. But basically what we have been doing since Pixelborn hasn't been able to be accessed anymore. So
I miss Pixelborn.
I do miss Pixelborn too. Yeah. There was a lot of doubt going into tournaments about my deck that I was able to almost kind of solidify or clear up or make fixes on because I just grinded on Pixelborn for like a night or two and I got a bunch of games in without leaving my house. But it's definitely been missed. Yeah. So I don't know. So we thought that it would be fun to kind of go through a list of how we have been prepping for competitive events without it. And we're just going to go down the list. And if you're doing these things already, then you're kind of on the same mindset as we are. And if not, then maybe there is something that you'd be interested in picking up and taking on yourself. So without further ado, why don't you run us through our first one on our list, Dalton?
So I think one of the most important and skill testing aspects of Lorcana is the mulligans. So you need to practice your mulligans over and over and over. And I know this seems really simple and obvious, but I feel like it can definitely be overlooked. And if you're curious to what this kind of looks like, you can head over to our YouTube channel, find our Mulligan or Not to Mulligan series, and this is just how we practice every day or before events start. And one thing that you should keep in mind is that you need to, a lot of times it's okay to just practice your mulligans in the dark against an unknown opponent, but you also need to learn what you need to mulligan for against specific opponents on the play and when you're on the draw, because inevitably you're going to be on the draw in every matchup and you're going to play a variety of decks. So knowing how to mulligan against every deck, whether you're going first or second, is really important. And the only way to get better at that is to play the game so you know your matchups, and then practice mulliganing so you can learn exactly what you want to look for.
Yeah, and that's something that we do in those videos too, is we will say, okay, we're going to do a couple of these as though we're playing against Sapphire Steel or whatever. But, I mean, in case you don't know what that means, even though I know to some it might seem obvious, we literally just have our deck next to us. We count out 7 and then we talk through why we would put it back or why we are looking for a certain card. And I think the talking through part is the unspoken essential thing, because, I mean, if you're doing it by yourself too, it might be hard because you don't have someone to give you feedback. Like, you kind of bounce off of me and I kind of bounce off of you for like, oh, why are you putting that back? Or you would say, I would put that back, or I would keep that, or whatever. So it is nice when you have a partner to do it with, but it's still obviously doable by yourself. But talking through why I'm going to put one of these back because I have 2 in my hand, so I don't need both. And this is the best card in my deck. Well, I'm definitely keeping it because it's the best card I'm trying to look for, right? So just realizing, not just practicing, but trying to understand why you would put back certain cards too is, I think, pretty important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings us into our second point.
Yeah.
Which is actually practicing and playing out your first several turns of the game.
Yeah. And we kind of do that too sometimes in those videos, but I mean, really, this is how, when we go to tournaments, I'm doing that. If we're practicing with a group of people and I am the odd man out for a little while, I'll sit there and I'll just practice my first several turns. And I feel like that is also extremely important. And some people might argue, well, you don't know what you're playing against and you don't know what they would do to interact with your cards and whether you would be able to play that. Yes, that is true. But if you think about it like this, and I'm going to come from like a softball perspective, but baseball and softball pitchers will practice their counts in certain game situations when they're just doing their pitching practice. They don't have anybody in the box. It's just them and their catcher. And they're going to say, okay, I'm going to throw this pitch. And it is a strike, but you can't argue, well, maybe they fouled that off, or maybe they hit that one, or maybe they swung and missed at that ball, but it was a ball. You know, like, obviously you don't know how your opponent is going to interact as a pitcher, but you still practice those with your catcher anyway, just in theory. Like, you're practicing what you can control. You can control if you throw a ball or a strike, right? So in here, you can control what you're going to ink, what you're going to play, and then you draw for your next turn. Okay, now does my game plan change? Am I still going to ink what I was already thinking I was going to ink on turn 2, now that I know what I drew? Or am I going to switch it up and maybe now ink what I just drew and I can play out maybe what I was going to ink instead, or whatever. Like, you're just practicing the things that you can control to start to get yourself in that mindset. And again, you don't know what you're playing against. You don't know what your opponent's going to do. Maybe, yes, you practice your questing and they would challenge and then you wouldn't have that same character on the board the next turn. I get it. But again, like, it's always good to start that thinking process, because I think it only helps you think of all the different lines of play when you're actually with an opponent against you across from that table, you know?
Yeah. And beyond that, I think there's just things that if you do this 10, 15, 20 times that you will learn. Let's say the whole goal of your deck is to play a 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop. If you do it enough times, you'll maybe realize that, oh, I probably need more than 4 1-drops in my deck. Or you might need more 2-cost characters in your deck, whatever it is.
Or more inkables versus non-inkables.
Definitely inkables. Like, maybe you're playing 20 inkables, and then you get to turn 4, and you're like, man, I cannot play my Queen's Castle very consistently on turn 4 because I'm having to ink it. So you know that you need to bring down the uninkable count to make sure you can play one of your best cards on turn 4 every time. Maybe you're playing like a broom deck and just going through it a bunch of times, you can kind of see the consistency of how many brooms you need to consistently draw a card with Yin Sid on turn 3 or whatever it is, right? So, or even Quest for 3 with Yin Sid on turn 3. There's a lot of things that you can learn from doing it, so yeah, it's definitely something we would encourage you to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know about you, but I feel like I go up to maybe turn 6. Like, I don't know. I try to get high up there. I don't just do like 3 turns and then say I'm done. Like, I do try to get up to turn 5 or 6. I don't know. How far do you go?
I think it depends on my deck and what my deck's trying to do. When I was playing Ruby Sapphire, I would do it for what would probably be most of the game, just because I want to see like how quickly I can, or and how often I can play a Be Prepared on turn 4 or 5. How quickly I can win with Tamatoa after turn 6, right? There are a lot of things I need to learn in order to prep for Atlanta. If I'm playing something like the deck that we're going to talk about later, I need to see how many 5 drops I need in my deck to make just in time consistently good. So,
Spoiler alert.
hey, we'll get there. So yeah, and for that deck specifically, I'm trying to be aggressive, so not as many turns play out, and I'm trying to do one really powerful thing on turn 3 really quickly, obviously. So I don't need to see how turns 6, 7, and 8 play out, just because the game might not last that long.
Right. Yeah, of course. And I know it seems like it's something that is so simple and small and almost kind of not needed, but it makes a huge impact. So if you're not doing those 2 things already, I would highly encourage it. It's something that you can do by yourself. And I think that that was one of the main issues with Pixelborn going away, is maybe someone doesn't have a local game store that has a league, or they're the only one of their friends group that plays Lorcana. And so Pixelborn was their only way in order to get games in. But I mean, keep in mind that those are 2 things that you don't need someone else for, that you can just practice with yourself with. So that's huge. And that's even something that I do, like, while I'm just, like I said, even before a tournament, we sit down, we normally get there early, we check in, and it's just a waiting game. And so I'm just sitting there and I'm just practicing my starting hands, you know?
Yeah, and like you would see me the nights leading, probably the couple weeks leading up to Atlanta, we would just be on the couch watching something, and I would just be doing this over and over again.
Honestly, even before Lorcana existed, I saw you doing a lot for Magic. And then once we got into Lorcana, I was like, maybe this is something I should be doing. So then I just started doing it. Like, you didn't even tell me, hey, you should do this. It was just me like, maybe this is something I need to be doing.
Yeah, it actually legitimately does help you learn a lot about your deck, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So if you are one of those people who are fortunate to have a pretty good local following of Lorcana, I think our next thing on the list is to just find a group of locals who are looking to specifically practice for competitive events. So do you want me to talk about this next one, or do you want to?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, so if you have a group at your LGS who does have that mindset, because obviously I feel like you do have a split in this game. You do have people that are wanting to do it casually, and then you have people that are wanting to take it the competitive route, and that is perfectly okay. It is, like, not everybody has to want to play in tournaments. Not everybody has to play a deck in the meta that is at every tournament. It's completely okay if that's not your MO. But it is something that, if it is your desire, that ideally try to find that group of people who have the same mindset and goals as you that you can practice with. Because obviously it's not going to be fun nor productive if you're practicing a tournament deck against someone who might be coming and just playing a deck for fun and something that they really enjoy. You're not getting better, and you're also not making it fun for them who came to have fun.
Yeah, the same is true for the inverse, right? If you're a more casual player, like, you probably want more casual, because it's definitely not fun to take your magical deck and play it against Ruby Amethyst or Ruby Sapphire, or whatever the best deck at the time is, and just get crushed, right?
Yeah. And that's not to say that once you find kind of like your group, that you have to stick within it. I know you and I have talked about on the podcast before how we have decks that we specifically bring to League because they're fun, they're thematic, they might be tribal or whatever. And so we use it against our friends that we know are looking to be more casual and fun. And then for our friends that we know do have a competitive mindset, we know that we're both going to be playing decks that we're trying to test for a tournament. So being aware enough to know who your opponents are, and even if you don't know what they're there for, it's okay to ask. It's okay to ask, hey, do you have like a casual deck, or do you have like a tournament deck you're trying out? It's okay to just be upfront and ask that person. It's completely okay. But I think the big thing is finding a group that does have that, and it doesn't have to be from your main LGS. It could be a group of people that kind of come together that they might have their own LGSs in there. And this is coming from us who there's several LGSs in our hometown. And so you have people that go to league at the different ones, and then we might just constantly see them at tournaments, and we know that they are having that same mindset. And so we're like, hey, do you want to test decks, during the weekdays or whatever? And so just finding that group with the same goal. And again, that seems obvious, but sometimes it needs to be said that just try to find one. And if there isn't one, like try to form it yourself. And yeah, go from there, I guess.
I think one of the biggest takeaways here is that whatever your hobby is, just try to find like-minded people that are going to enjoy it the same way you do.
Mm-hmm. And it's okay to dabble in both ends of the spectrum. Just make sure that you're bringing the deck that's prepared to dabble in that side of the spectrum you're planning on doing that day.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then our last one is another pretty simple one, but it's just join a bunch of Discords. There are a lot of Discord channels out there where people can play games over webcam, and some that are actually designed for that. We'll link our tabletop camera in the description of this, just in case you don't have one and are interested in doing that. Ours is pretty cheap, but it definitely works.
It was like, and I'm guessing because this was like over a year ago, like $40 on Amazon.
Yeah. So not that big of a investment, but really if you like playing games over webcam or you don't mind it, it's just an easy way to do that.
Yeah. And they don't sponsor us. It's literally just a random one we bought for like you to play Magic against your brother.
Exactly. So yeah, most of your favorite content creators will probably have a channel that's similar to Looking for a Game or Play Online. Some of the Discords that are specifically for this are the Real Play Network or Pixelborn.
Yeah.
Pixelborn Connect is a newer thing that Pavel's been up to, so definitely check those two things out. And then Discords like the Lorcana Goons Discord or the 20 Lore Pro Discord. Those Discords have channels where you can look for a game as well. So make sure you're doing that if you're kind of remote, don't get to go out that much, and just feel like playing some games online.
Yeah, it really is simple. If you've never hopped into one of those before, it really is just like, hey, who's looking to play? And then someone could be like, I am. And then you guys just start coordinating whatever you're going to do it on. So, and another one that we actually want to mention, so that wasn't our last one, but basically to check out tournament results from preferably larger tournaments and checking out those deck lists, both so you can be aware of the meta and what you might see, and then to also get ideas for your own list to take and adapt from there. So obviously you don't choose one that got fourth at a tournament of 15 people. Mm-hmm. Look for the ones that are significantly bigger, and that way okay, that's a bigger pool of people. So obviously, just like an experiment, you want a big sample size.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone goes 7-1 with a deck list, then it's probably pretty reasonable. Whereas if someone goes 2-1-1 and ends up getting in the top 4, then it's like, who knows what could have really happened in that sample size.
For sure. And that's actually exactly what we did for the next few weeks. I don't know about you, but I'm nervous.
I am too. I don't know if my deck is any good, but it's going to be fun.
I think mine is going to surprise my opponent. I'm going to go for a sneak attack. Do we want to talk about them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to talk about yours first, or?
Yeah, so I kind of spoiled mine earlier.
Yeah, that's right.
I saw a deck list from Towelman Purple on X, and he's a pretty big content creator. He was playing a deck that was essentially trying to do just in time into Jim Hawkins, putting down the RLS legacy. So on turn 3, you have a 4/4 evasive body because Jim gets to go to the RLS legacy, and you have an 8 willpower location. So locations are very annoying to deal with a lot of the time.
Yep.
Unless you have Maui in your deck, it can almost feel impossible to deal with. So his whole thing is just like, let's try to get a location out, as a really powerful location out, as quickly as possible. And just in time into Jim Hawkins is a really strong way to do that. I was really intrigued by his deck list, and that is kind of the inspiration for my deck list. I'm not playing the exact same list as his. I think there are some maybe suboptimal cards in that deck list. Like, he was playing the Shift Queen of Hearts, and that card doesn't really make too much sense.
Hey, that did you good in Atlanta.
It did. But in this deck, it doesn't really make too much sense to me. I'm playing Kita instead because, for one, it quests for 2, and it can protect your locations against a wide board. So if your opponent has 3 or 4 characters out and they're gonna maybe challenge your RLS Legacy, you play Kita, and your RLS Legacy and your characters already in play get to survive for another turn.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think is really good. He wasn't playing Flynn, which I think Flynn Rider into Sisu is just a really good backup plan as well. But yeah, it's a really cool deck. It has been really fun. It's kind of a high rolly, like the times where you do get just in time into Jim Hawkins, into the RL's Legacy, you feel like it's really hard to lose. But then sometimes you get just in time into, you don't even have a 5-drop in your hand, and it just feels really bad. So, or you draw just in time off the top of your deck when it could be literally anything. Any character would probably win the game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a really fun deck. I think it can do really powerful things, but I think I'm just trying to figure out a way to make it a little more consistent. So, we'll see.
Makes sense. And if anything, if Saturday doesn't go how you like with it, you can just swap back on Sunday to the old tried and true for you.
Yeah, if it ends up being really bad, I'll probably just build Ruby Amethyst or Amethyst Steel.
Yeah, for sure. I've actually been experimenting around quite a bit since we've last talked about the deck lists we've been playing. After Chicago, I kind of wanted to take a little bit of a break from Emerald Steel just because it's something that I was doing for both set 3 and 4. Wanted to switch it up a little bit, but didn't want to give up my Emerald completely. So I was doing an Emerald Amber deck for a while there. I basically took a very similar deck list to one that made day 2 for Chicago. And then I might have changed 2 or 3 cards in it. I kept it pretty similar. And that was actually really fun. And I had done that for a while. I then went back to the old Bucky Steel deck. Did that for a little while. And then now I'm trying something new and a little nerve-wracking. And that is a super aggressive Emerald Ruby deck. It is a list that I have adapted quite a bit with the help of you. But it had done pretty well in a 61-person tournament. It got first place out of 61. So it is bringing back Curse Merfolk, bringing back the 2-drop Flynn that makes you discard. Those were 2 cards that I was playing for Atlanta, but then obviously with the new cards I ditched for Chicago, so it feels weird to be playing with them again. But also having the Ruby Flynn, the Sisu, I get to now play Medusa this time, so that's been pretty fun. And it is very quick. It can definitely run away with games pretty quickly, especially if you're playing against a control deck. And I think the one deck that I'm pretty scared to play against is Steel Song, just because pretty much all the Emerald characters are 2 willpower. And I don't have the steel, but I do have some of the bigger root. Like I at least have Medusa and Maui to take care of any threats. But sometimes at that point, by the time I see those, it's almost too late. So it's almost like I gotta outrace at the beginning and just be super aggressive. So I'm looking forward to that one. Pretty excited, pretty nervous. I feel like I was wanting to be an aggressive player when the game first came out, and then I felt like I didn't have any sort of way to deal with any threats, and I didn't have the ability to switch from that role of
being the aggressor into the aggro.
Yeah.
Or the control. Sorry.
Yeah. So that's why I really liked Emerald Steel, and I gravitated towards that. And once I realized how that felt for me and that I can switch back and forth easily, I just stuck to it. So it's a little bit out of my comfort zone that now I'm going back and almost kind of being a little bit helpless in that sense. But I'm hoping that it is uncommon enough to where I just catch my opponent by surprise. Just run away with it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are definitely going to be draws where you just play like Curse Merfolk into Flynn in the Ruby Flynn into Sisu, and your opponent just dies very quickly. So I'm excited to see how you do with that deck list, because if you didn't build it, I wanted to. So yeah.
Yeah, I like it so far. We tested it. Well, I tested it. We tested our decks the other night, and I was pretty pleased with the way that it played out after I got past the Steel Song. So we'll see. If not, I'll go back to Emerald Steel on Sunday.
We always have our tried and true.
We always have our tried and true. So, but yeah, I don't know. That's what I got.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this weekend. Finally get to play in a set championship.
I know. I really want that Ursula. I want this stuff for this set champ more than I wanted the previous one, just because Stitch really isn't my thing. I don't see it.
I like Stitch.
I mean, I do like it. I love the movie. It's a beautiful movie. I love like everything about it, but I'm not like the type of person where when you see something Stitch, you like have to have it or you freak out over it. I like Ursula. Give me the tentacles. Give me the evil. I love it. And we gotta admit, her song is an absolute banger.
It is a banger. Absolutely. It's a great song.
It's probably one of my favorite villain songs, honestly.
100%.
So, but yeah, it's gonna be great. And hopefully you guys are doing well on your end. And good luck to you the rest of the month. We will for sure now go back to our starter deck. We kind of put that on hold. We were going to do the starter decks next, but then when the news of Bucky broke, we're like, we need to put the starter deck reviews on hold and address the whole thing with Bucky. And then it kind of turned into a whole catch up episode. I feel like here we are. We're back. Back again. Shady's back.
Came out with a new album.
I saw that.
Yeah, I haven't listened to it yet. I'm going to.
Maybe that'll be our hype album on Saturday. We'll see. But all right, we're rambling. I'm rambling. That's
You're
what I do when I feel awkward. So we're just gonna here wrap it up. Give me the signal in the back. All right, here we go. Have a great week, guys.
Have a wonderful weekend, guys.